What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris, this is 4K Motoring, and along with NASCAR's 2024 season beginning, we too are working on our All-American pushrod V8 powered platform here. Now this one's going to be kind of a two-part episode because I've made a pretty major advancement on this car, a pretty major fix, and I think solved a big problem with it, and also we're going to tackle a smaller problem. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. Well, with that introduction out of the way, two things I want to talk about are the ongoing EBCM, or electronic brake control module, active handling system error problem that I've been dealing with now for the better part of a year. I noticed probably, maybe even a little over a year ago, I posted a video on how I was suddenly getting an active handling system error. And this occurred mostly when the vehicle was hot, I noticed. And when I got it, it would list me off about 8 different codes that all instantly appeared, so it wasn't related to one single sensor or one single unit, which confused me a whole lot. I tried a couple things to fix that, and it actually got to the point where it was getting bad enough that every now and then when I was going through a kind of aggressive right-hand turn when the vehicle was warm, it would go ahead and attempt to lock up this front wheel to the point it almost made some scary events for me. I mean, without a doubt. That worried me a little bit, so I did some digging into it, and I basically tried kind of one last thing that really should have been one of my first attempts, and something that is pretty doable at home with one little exception. Basically what I needed was one of these service computers. This one is from BossCom, which I believe is a Chinese company, and this is their advanced auto diagnostic scanner. And this is what I use. This is one of the products I received from Amazon. I'll leave a link down to it in the description below. It's not super expensive. That's what I use to be able to go in and basically activate the ABS pump and some of the other features manually in order to cycle it to hopefully test things out. What I did was, using this, I was able to cycle the ABS pump to ensure it worked. I was able to open and close the servos for the inlets and outlets for all 4 corners of the car, for every basically channel, every brake line channel for the vehicle, and ensure that they are all working. And after doing that and cycling them all through, I realized everything seems to be working with the EBCM. Everything's communicating properly. There's not a fault within it that I'm finding. So that gave me a little bit of confidence. Now this is a 2001 Corvette, and that does have a rebuildable EBCM, the brake control module, the ABS module. The 2000 and earlier models are not rebuildable from what I understand, and once that gets done, or once you have an error with that, you're pretty much screwed. The 2001 and up, it is rebuildable, but it's still not super cheap. So I was kind of fearing that I would have to do that. I was fearing that I was getting some yaw sensors, some pitch roll sensors. Everything was going haywire in this car. So what I decided to do was, using this computer, do another brake bleed. And I did a 4-corner brake bleed, putting fresh fluid all the way through it, running the ABS pump, controlling the solenoids, really making sure that every bit of fluid that was in that EBCM, everything that was in that ABS module was new fluid, there's no air bubbles, and really clean that out. Now this is after I already cleaned this out. I pulled the actual plug out to clean it. I made sure that all the fittings were tight, and had already previously done one brake bleed without activating the ABS pump. But this time it really seemed to make a difference. After driving it, I immediately noticed I wasn't getting any more errors. Even when the car got hot, I know it's kind of wintertime, even when the car was hot, it was a hot day and I was driving hard, the aggressive right-hand turns were no longer an issue. So I have been waiting to tell you guys about this because I really wanted to test it. And I've gotten this car into a couple kind of high-performance driving scenarios where I've been getting it pretty warm, getting the temperatures up, things like sitting in traffic, getting the temperatures up, driving it hard, getting the temperatures up, and I've not had any more errors. So I really think, knock on wood, I think I fixed the problem, and this thing is not having any more issues. The brake fluid is super clean in there, and I'm going to keep an eye on that. This is something I'd recommend for you guys, especially the 2000 and below cars that don't have rebuildable brake control modules. Flush out everything in that car. Turn the ABS pump on, make sure all the solenoids are open, and really flush out all the fluid in front of that pump, or from within that pump. That way, hopefully it's not retaining moisture, it's not getting kind of grimy and clotted up, and hopefully it'll provide you a much longer service life. As for me, you guys saw the videos where I went and cleaned all the grounding points. And again, that's something I'd also recommend for anybody with an older Corvette, especially one that's been driven, higher mileage. Probably worth doing just because of these fiberglass cars having issues. Clean all the grounding points, make sure that they're secure enough, and then flush out that fluid using something to control that ABS pump to cycle it in a test mode. You're gonna thank me later. Again, I'm gonna leave the service computer that I use personally in the link below if you guys wanna get one of those. I've used it on a couple vehicles, especially the newer cars that require the electric parking brake disengagement to be able to even change the brake pads, which is ridiculous. It works on all those and is a great thing to have in your garage. I'm sure other models work as well too, so if you have one you like, leave that in the description below, especially if it's inexpensive. I'm sure other people would love to hear about it. But overall, that seems to have solved my problem and I really enjoy driving this vehicle again. That is until recently when I started noticing the dreaded shaking of the front wheel whenever I apply the brakes. Obviously, very classic warped rotor symptoms. It's nothing that I'm unsure of the cause, but you guys may remember back probably about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, after I bought this car, very quickly I needed brakes. Because I didn't know what I was gonna do yet, Willwoods or really any sort of brake modifications, I wasn't sure at that point because I hadn't driven the car a whole lot. I just went with Powerstop pads. They're high performance driving pads, but I left the rotors. The rotors were pretty smooth, they had no issues. Fast forward now 10, 15,000 miles or so since then, and a little bit of driving like a Corvette, I've now noticed some warping in the front rotors. That said, my pads are still pretty thick, and I know you guys are gonna have different opinions on this, but personally, with those Powerstop pads being as thick as they are and as new as they are, like I said, maybe about 10,000 miles or just over on them, I feel pretty confident in leaving those for now, and we just got some new rotors. Now from Rock Auto, we were able to get some new rotors, and these actually surprised me. I went with ACDelco, which are, as you know, the OEM brand for Chevrolet, but unbeknownst to me, apparently there are performance rotors for the C5 Corvette that is made by ACDelco. I had no idea. So I went ahead and ordered them, and if I can open them real quick, I kind of show you what they look like. So they're not drilled, and they don't have kind of the conventional cheap slots, but they've got some slots in them. So I know this is a job most of you guys can probably do yourselves. I'll do kind of a very quick gloss over of the job, but I just want to go ahead and show you the before and after. Again, these C6 wheels on the C5 Corvette. The rotor itself, while it hasn't been driven in a couple days, it doesn't look too bad. There's not a lot of rust on the center. It is coated. You get a little bit of rust on the outside. There is ever so slightly kind of a lip up there when I run my finger up it where the pad has been riding, but it's not bad. It probably could be turned. Personally, I don't like turning rotors as cheap as they are, just for removing material, removing heat compliance, and sometimes the heat damage of the rotor is still existing under where you turned it. So all we have to do is jack up the car, pull this wheel off. We're going to go ahead and pull the caliper off, and then we should be able to just slide the rotor off, slide the new one on, put everything back in reverse order, and we'll have a slightly better looking car. Again, this is just the Performance ACDelco rotors with Powerstop Extreme Performance pads going on this 2001 Corvette with fresh fluid on some pretty sticky Michelin Pilot Sport All Season 4s. Overall, this is a great combination for an aggressive street car, and I've been pretty happy with it. So let's go ahead and swap this out and see how long it takes. All right, first we got one of our jacking pucks. This is an aluminum one that I really like. I've got a set of these. You find it under the car, right about where the front door jamb meets. Goes in, turns 90 degrees. Full disclosure, these are aftermarket lug nuts, and obviously not the OEM wheels, but aftermarket lug nuts. They're gonna be a 19 millimeter from me. May be different for you. All right, our tire's coming off. So we've got our caliper and our caliper bracket that we've got to get off. They're gonna be two different sizes here. You can just take the caliper bracket off if you can get to it with a bigger wrench, but sometimes you have it's easier to clear it if you take the caliper off as well. Okay, we're able to get that rotor off. There it is right there. Able to get that caliper slid off with just those two retainer bolts. These are gonna be 21 millimeter bolts, and they do have some, at least mine did, some red Loctite on them. So you're going to need a little bit of torque to get those things off. Impact wrench if you have one that fits, or at the very least a breaker bar. That way you can get that red Loctite broken free and get those things out of there. Make sure you have some sort of thread locker to put back on them. Your brakes are something you do not want to have bolts back out of while you're driving. So we're going to go ahead and hit the hub with a little bronze brush. That way we can make sure there's no corrosion that's going to be making it not sit flush. We're going to throw the new rotor on there and go ahead and put things back, and we'll check it out right after. All right, here's our first one on. Take a look at it for yourself. See what you think, as opposed to that worn out rotor there. Personally, I think that looks a lot nicer, and just having a new contact surface should pretty much eliminate all of our warping and give us pretty adequate braking for time to come. There is a lot of pad left under there, so I'm not too worried about these pads wearing out anytime soon. If it bothers you a whole lot, you can get a new set of pads when you get the new rotors. That way they bed in together with that new friction coating. Otherwise, just make sure you follow the break-in procedures for the actual pads and rotors themselves. A couple heavy brakes, really get some heat up, and then cool them off and let them kind of heat treat themselves. There are, this is worth noting, there are a right and left hand rotor. Obviously the veining on the inside is directional to make the gases come out the correct way, not so much the actual pattern on the face of the rotor. So make sure you have the correct one. What we're showing is the 18A947 SD is the driver's side, and the 18A946 SD is the passenger side. So 47 driver, 46 passenger. We're going to go ahead and get that wheel back on, get the other side done, and go ahead and get this car back out on the road. Again, all of our braking issues should be solved. Our active handling system is giving no more errors. Our steering wheel wobble with that awesome new steering wheel, check out that video above, will be over, and this car will be driving good as new again. We still have to do our suspension bushings. That is next. We're going to be replacing all the ball joints and all the bushings, as this car is 22 years old, has going on 130,000 miles. We've got a set of urethane joints pretty much all the way around. Should tighten the car up a good bit without being overbearing. We're not doing any of the actual driveline being urethane, so hopefully it keeps some of those driveline vibrations out of the car, and this is just a solid upgrade to promote a little bit more precise handling. Like I said, this is a video I've been wanting to make for some time now. I just wanted to verify that what I was telling you was actually accurate, and I had enough time to test this. Like I said, this BossCom diagnostic system here, available on Amazon. This thing is not super expensive. I was pretty impressed with it. It's been useful for way more than just this, but it was able to do stuff like this, and I think that was significantly cheaper than getting a rebuilt EBCM or going through any of the sensors. So really, this was a good tool to have. It really was. Overall, I think that new brake rotor looks great. And with the extra surface area and kind of venting there, it should perform better with cooling and dealing with high temperatures if I ended up doing some track days or anything like that with this car again with the factory brakes. One thing I didn't mention is that if you have a brake pad spreader, it'll make this job a whole lot easier, just sliding those calipers off and back on. Very easy to do at home with just these couple tools. Again, I'm going to leave links to everything specifically that I use down in the description below. Again, if you guys haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you want more of this content. Stay tuned, we'll be back soon.